All right, good afternoon, everyone. And for those of you on the West Coast, it's still morning, so good morning. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the Denali webinar for December 15th, 2015. Today we're going to be talking about processing your W-2s using the Denali payroll software to do that. And we'll go through all of the steps on getting through the W-2 processing, which you will do at the end of your payroll year. It's actually done after December 31st, so we'll talk about that when we get going here. My name is Jeremy Beislein. I'm actually a systems trainer here at Cougar Mountain Software, and I will be your presenter today. Any of you that are here today, we appreciate you being here. We do ask that if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and type those in the chat, but please keep yourself muted because we're kind of short on time today, as usual. We're going to try to wrap things up in about 30 minutes here today. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so on the agenda today, we're going to be talking about the Denali W2 process, which is actually done using the Atrix application. We partnered with Atrix, and the Atrix application is the software that fully integrates with Denali that processes all of your payroll tax forms for federal and all states where you have payroll tax forms that are required. We'll talk about the W2 preview report that we have in Denali. Then we're going to go through the steps of actually running your W2 forms through the Atrix application, beginning with verifying your company information and your W3 information. We'll talk about the preparation of your W2s using the Atrix W2 Grid. We'll talk about the W2 processing, the printing and e-filing options that Atrix provides. And then in the end, we'll wrap it up with the Q&A session to get closed up here. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and get started. To begin with, we'll talk a little bit about the Atrix application. Basically what that is another software application that fully integrates with Denali. And if you have Atrix installed, which most of you who have Denali payroll should have the Atrix application installed with your Denali payroll module. The Atrix application provides you with all federal tax forms regarding payroll taxes and all state payroll tax forms as well, including state unemployment forms for any states that require payroll tax forms and unemployment forms to be filed. So using Atrix, you have the option to file any of the payroll tax forms that you may need to file with your system, which comes with your Denali payroll module, your Denali payroll application. Before you do the W-2s, though, we do recommend that you actually run the W-2 preview report in Denali. Now, this isn't required, but it is basically an option to show you, kind of give you a preview of how the numbers are going to appear on the W-2 forms in Atrix before you even open the Atrix application. So with that, I'm going to switch over to my desktop here that I've got Denali payroll running. Now, to run the W2 preview report, when you first set up Denali, you want to set up the W2 formats. And what this is for is after you've set up your benefits and deductions, then you're going to put the benefit and deduction codes that you have set up in Denali. If those numbers that are associated to these codes need to appear on the W2 form, you will go to the W2 formats and put the codes in to whichever box they need to appear on the W2 form. Now, one thing I want to clear up is this particular setting in Denali Payroll has nothing to do with Atrix. The only thing this does for you is it sets up that W2 preview report in Denali. When we get into Atrix, we'll talk about how to associate these codes with the correct boxes on the W2 forms as needed. So once these are set up here under the W2 formats, then that sets up your W2 preview report that you're now ready to run. And those codes, those benefit deduction codes, if they are required to be on the W2 forms, you can now see those numbers on your W2 preview report when you run this report. Now, I've run it in detail, so this shows a report with each employee and what their numbers are going to be on that W2, on their W2 form. Basically, what you see is the employee information, their name and address, and then you see each box on the W-2 form, such as box 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so forth, with the numbers that are going to be in those boxes. So here we have the report with the W-2 boxes. And as you can see, based on my W-2 format codes that I've set up with my benefit deductions, the numbers associated with our employee here, John Archer, are going to print on my W-2. They belong on my W-2 in box 12 with these codes associated with them. So for example, code D would be for any retirement deferment such as 401k plans. Code DD would be for any healthcare benefits that the company provides as per the new Affordable Care Act. Down here you'll see the state and local tax information for the employee as well. Then on the last page you get a total. Now your total, if you go here at the bottom, here's my totals. This is basically what I want to see on my W-3 form. These are all the boxes on the W-3 with the total numbers. That's what I want to see on the W-3 when I do my form in Atrix. Now because my demo company has many states that we've set up, then you've got a whole list of different state codes that are printing in boxes 15, 16, and 17. For most employers, you're only going to have 1 or 2 state codes. But with Denali Payroll, you have the option to set up as many as you need. Okay, so we'll move on from that. Once you've got the W-2 preview and everything looks good, then the next step is to go ahead and launch the Atrix application. Now to do that, you go into your Denali Payroll. You must make sure the Atrix application is installed and ready to go, which should be installed once you've installed Denali Payroll. You should also install the Atrix. The Atrix application itself is free to download and install. However, if you're going to use it, they do require you to register, and there's an annual price for the registration for Atrix if you're going to actually print and file tax forms using the Atrix application. You can get the information on the pricing for that and your annual registration key from your Cougar Mountain account representative. But once that's installed, then you select the Reports menu in Denali Payroll, and it's the very last option. It's going to be under Tax Reports. That is your tax forms is what that selection is under the Reports menu. When you select that, then it brings up the options you have for running the Atrix application. The first thing it's asking us is what kind of a report are we going to be running here today? Are we going to run a federal report or a state report? Which form are we running? Is it a federal or a state form? The second option is which specific form. We've got federal selected, so these are a list of all of the federal forms that are available to you in the Atrix application. And you can run any one of these forms. Once you have Atrix installed, you can run any one of these. To actually print and file these, you must register Atrix, which you can get the registration code from your Cougar Mountain account representative. So for example, if I want to run the 941 form, this is my quarterly employer tax report that I have to send to the IRS every 3 months. You can do that with Atrix. And what's great about it is once you've made your selections here, then when you go ahead and launch the Atrix application, the 941 form actually appears on the screen and is ready to go. I'll just go ahead and do that real quick. And then you just simply print out and file that, or using Atrix e-file options, you can actually electronically file this form with the IRS. And all of that is done for you. See, now the Atrix application is launching. We'll go through the company verification. I'll go into this in a little more detail with the W-2 processing, but the steps are essentially the same. And there you have it. Here's our 941 form that you can actually see on the screen there with the numbers filled in, pulled in from your Denali Payroll software, the correct numbers as needed. Now here it's telling us because I don't actually have a registered copy, then I must register in order to actually run this form, e-file it or print it. Or if I want to just test out the software without actually filing, I can evaluate. And you'll see that once you go ahead and launch your Atrix application. Now it's asking me to fill in the numbers in red because those numbers did not pull in from Denali. So I'm going to close this form for now because today's webinar is on W-2s. But before we jump in there, just some examples of the state forms. Let's say I need to run my California report, report of new employees. That's for your unemployee. Here's a payment coupon you can print and send for payroll tax deposits. And here's my California Form DE9, DE9C. So these are my quarterly tax reports for California. And you just select which state you're running your state forms in and what form you need to run. So here's my Idaho tax forms and my Idaho unemployment form, quarterly unemployment form for the state of Idaho. But today's webinar is on W-2s, so we're going to select the W-2. Now I know a lot of you are probably wondering, well, how do I run my 2015 W-2 forms? To run the 2015 forms, you must wait until Atrix releases the 2015 form because that form has not yet been released. The reason for that is because we cannot run our 2015 W-2s until after December 31st of 2015, and we haven't reached that date yet. So all we have available is the last year's forms until that date comes. Atrix does release those forms a week or two ahead of that date, so those will be available here coming up in the next few days. But we'll go ahead and run this webinar today. It's going to be the same process when you run the 2015 form as we see here, only you'll have the option in the menu to select the 2015. The Atrix application will be updated for you, and it will give you that option at that point. So when you first launch the W-2 form in Atrix, then it's going to run you through a little setup wizard. This is where you basically select the Atrix options and verify your information. So the options you have is you can do a test drive of the W-2 process with your first 25 employees, or you can run a test drive of your W-2 process with all employees. Or if you are comfortable enough, if you use Atrix before and you're comfortable enough to go ahead and process your W-2s without testing it, you go ahead and select the last option. Say, no, I don't need to test it. Let's just jump right in and go to work. Start processing W-2s. One of the things to point out is if you don't run the test drive, if you go into this option here, every step you make going forward cannot, there comes a point in the process where you can't go back once you pass up a certain point in the process. Now, if you ever get to a point where you need to start clear over, you can always do that. But once you've filed, you cannot start over. Once they have been filed, the W-2 forms have been filed, the only options after that would be to refile those forms using the W-2 corrected option. Basically, you're going to file a corrected W-2. And Atrix will keep track of where you're at in the process. And once you've submitted the forms for filing, there's no going back at that point. However, in the test drive, you can always start over any time because nothing actually gets filed at the end. It goes through the entire process without actually filing the forms. Okay, so once you've made your selection here, we'll go ahead and click Next. And now here's where we verify the company information on the next few screens. The first step is to verify your federal employer identification number. This number cannot be changed in Atrix. This number must be set up in Denali. And the question is where do I set that up in Denali? That is set up under the tax codes in your tax code setup. Specifically, the federal ID number is set up under the federal tax code. So as you can see here, I've got my federal ID number set up here and also under my unemployment account number since it's the same number for federal. Unemployment is the same thing as 940 or FUTA tax, and the IRS uses the same number for both taxes. Withholding tax, Social Security, Medicare tax is all under the top number, and FUTA, unemployment tax, under the bottom number. So that's where the numbers are set up in the federal code, and that's what you'll see here, automatically imported from your federal tax code here in Denali. Then the next window, it's asking you to verify your company information. Minimize that so it's not in the way. Basically, your company name, address, phone number, address, city, state, phone number, contact person's name. This is for the W-3 form. So we can put in the contact person of who is filing the W-2 form. And I did that wrong because it's only wanting the first name in this field and the last name in this field. And my title here is, typically this would be maybe the PR director or whatever your title is for the company, the payroll person. Email is optional, but recommended. You can go ahead and put that in if you need to. And your phone number and the contact address. Once you've confirmed all the information for the W-3 form, fill that in here. Your company address and all the information here will be filled in automatically from what's in Atrix or from what's in Denali payroll. But these forms down here, these fields will need to be typed in. Then we go to the next screen, and it's asking, are you filing for your company, or are you a third-party representative filing on behalf of this company? In other words, are you like a payroll processor for a company, and this company is just one of your clients? If you're a third-party representative, it's going to ask for paid tax preparer information when you select this option. If you just say, I'm filing for my own company, it will skip that step. Now here we are verifying our state tax withholding numbers. And most of our clients here, most people using Denali payroll, again, they're only going to have one or two of these state codes, but because our demo company has many different state codes, as you can see, then we've got several listed in this list here. And there's two for each state. There's the unemployment number and the withholding number for each state. And that is just verifying these numbers are pulled in from Denali payroll. If you don't have these numbers filled in on your tax codes, on the state codes in Denali payroll, these numbers will be blank. However, you can actually edit this information in Atrix if needed. So you can add the number and edit the information directly in Atrix for the state numbers and also the local tax codes as well if needed. The federal tax code, you cannot do that. That must be filled in correctly in Denali payroll. And then we go through and it just asks you to verify the data. Basically, it says, do you have any employees exempt from any part of Medicare or Social Security, yes or no? Do you have any employees who earn Social Security tips? That must be reported, which would be reported on box 7 or 8 of the W-2 form. And you would say yes or no for that. Any employees who have a foreign address? Do you use control numbers on your W-2s? Do you have any employees who have elected to only receive W-2 forms electronically? If you have any employees, question 5, this is very important. If you have any employees who have elected to receive W-2 forms electronically, any employees, even just one, you must answer yes on this question. Otherwise, the system will assume that all of your employees will receive a paper copy of their W-2 either directly from you or from Atrix based on your filing options you select at the end of the process. Now it's asking for W-3 information. If you're using control numbers, what control number are you going to put in box A of the W-3? If not, you just leave that field blank. Then it asks you, what kind of a taxpayer are you? Most of you will select 941 taxpayer, but some of you may select some of these other options as well if needed. And you can select as many of these that apply in your specific situation. You also must select an option in box B. One of these options or none that apply if 501c, state, local, or federal government. If none of those apply, you just leave none apply selected, which means none of those get checked for box B. If you provide sick pay through a third party, you would check this box. And then you would also fill in the information for box 14 on the W-3 form there. Establishment number and other employer ID numbers used this year. These are some other boxes on the W-3 that may be needed. Also, if your business terminated this year, you would check this box. And that would be indicated on the W-3 form. Now it's just going through some final settings here. It asks here, please read carefully, any incorrect information answering incorrectly may require you to restart the filing process. So make sure that you have answered this question specifically. Most of you will say no on this question. Most of you only have one employer ID number and you'll only have one data file under that employer ID number. However, some of you may be tracking multiple companies in Denali that all run under the same employer ID number. If that is the case, you must answer yes here. And by doing so, Denali will pull the data from all of your companies that use the same federal ID number that you have set up in the controller. Now I'm talking about here when you set up companies. If you this is a list of all company files you have set up in Denali. And if these files are all using the same ID, or if you have multiple files using the same employer ID, you must answer yes on this form so that Atrix knows to pull data from multiple databases, not just from a single database. Now once we've answered these questions, then we move on to the next step in the Efile process. Now there's a warning that popped up here. One of my employees had no payroll data, so therefore that employee will not be included in my W2 processing for this year. So I simply click OK, and this brings up what we call the Atrix W2 Grid. I'm going to go ahead and go full screen on that. So basically the first step we see on this grid, just to give you an explanation, each one of these rows is an employee. This is an employee W2. So this is the employee information. Each column is the W2 form, the box on the W2 form. Each column represents one of the boxes on the W2, and the row represents the employee and the information that's going to go on their W2 form underneath whatever box that you see here. Now what we do here is the first step, we verify employee information. So the first 3 columns are highlighted, and we can even drag that out further to get more of the employee information as needed, because we separate employee information from the dollars, from the money, basically is what we're going to see on this particular system in the W2 grid. So the first step that's highlighted in blue, that's the employee information. Atrix is just simply asking you to just check and make sure that the information that was pulled in from Denali is correct. Once we've done that, we just simply click Next Step. The second thing we need to do is verify the dollars that were pulled in from Atrix. So I'm going to pull that back over here so I can get a better view of all the money that was pulled in, the wages, taxes, and so forth. And if I scroll over, I can go all the way back to the federal information and then the state information. Now this is telling us to just verify state wages and taxes, make sure that the state information is correct. If we want to go back to employee information, we can, or we simply go to the next step. The third step is to verify all of the different benefit and deduction codes that were pulled in from Denali. Now, Atrix doesn't know what to do with these codes, so you will have to decide, you have to determine where this information goes on the W2 form, if applicable. Some of these will not go on the W2 form. For example, 401k company match may not apply to the W2, so we would just leave that unassigned. But the 401k deduction, that will apply on the W2, so we must assign that to one of the fields on our W2. And we just simply select the drop-down and select where this item needs to go. Well, for 401k, that goes in box 12, but box 12 needs more information. We also need to assign a code. Typically, 401k deferments are put into box 12 under code D of the W2 form. And it even has the description for code D, elective deferrals to a 401k, cash or deferred arrangement. So we would go ahead and select this option, and then all employees, it's giving me a warning here, the value in this column will not be automatically added to box 1, 3, or 5. And the reason why is because this was a pre-tax deduction, so we don't want it in boxes 1, 3, or 5 if we shelter them from those boxes. Now, what we've done in our demo company is we've only sheltered it from box 1. It's already included in box 3 and 5 when we set up our shelter code. But because we sheltered this from our wages, tips, and other compensation, which is box 1, the IRS requires that we put this value in box 12 under code D. So I've now assigned that, which turns that yellow to a green. It says we have now assigned these to box 12. And it popped up that warning because by selecting box 12 code D, that does not add those to your wages and tips. Some of those options may add those, depending on what the option is you select. So some of these other options probably don't go on the W2, so we'll go ahead and leave those off. However, the new Affordable Health Care Act requires us that any health insurance premiums that the company pays on behalf of the employee as a company benefit must also be assigned to Box 12, and that goes under code DD. So that goes, and even says there, cost of employer-sponsored health coverage. So we'll assign that one as well. And that goes ahead and assigns that to Box 12. So these numbers will now print on the employee's W-2 form as well. Any other codes that you may have set up that need to be on the W-2 form, you will need to set those up as well. Some of you who are especially in New Jersey, you may have to put a number in Box 14, and it gives you those options right here if you need to put those on there. I don't have those set up in my demo company though, but those of you who are employers in New Jersey should have the information on what those go to. Once we've assigned all of our unassigned columns that apply to the correct boxes, we go to the next step, and then it even warns us, specifically mentioning New Jersey, it requires specific names for its additional state taxes of FLI, DI, and so forth. Atrix will take care of that if you assign those correctly. Now it's popping up some errors here. We've got a lot of numbers that haven't been assigned, so are we sure that we are done assigning? This is all this is telling us, and if we're sure, we can continue without correcting. We have another error. One of our state tax withholding numbers is greater than our state wages. Typically, you're not allowed to do that, so we probably need to fix that. So we're going to go back and fix that particular error, which is going to be found right here. See, I've got New York City taxes. Oh, that's my local. Let me go back to my state here. Right here, there it is. I've got $420 in taxes, but nothing in wages. And the reason why is because this employee we've set up in our demo to deduct state tax withholding from his pay specifically for this state, but it's not recording the wages for that state. We did that as an example in one of our other demonstrations. But I can simply fix that by typing in the number for the state wages right here in Atrix, and then that fixes that error. So you can edit these numbers right here on the column as needed, any one of these. I just wanted to illustrate that to you so you could see that. Once that is done, we're going to verify the information. It's bringing up our errors again for the unassigned numbers. We know that's okay. And now there's no additional errors, so we can complete our filing now. Now, one of the things I want to talk about here is the Complete W2 Efile service. What's great about this service is Atrix offers you an option here for only $1.95 per employee. They will handle this process for you. They will take care of all of your W-2 filings for both federal and state, including your state reconciliation forms and your W-3 filing for the federal. And they'll send those off to the Social Security Administration electronically and to your state tax agency for you automatically. They also mail the paper copies to your employees for you. They will take care of that for you, so you don't have to do anything. They will mail out copies B, C, and 2 to your employees and do the e-file in copies A and 1 for your federal and state. And they'll just take care of it for you for only $1.95 per employee. Now, if you select this option, keep in mind there is a minimum $24.95 for this particular function, for this option. So if you have, say, if you have less than 10 employees, it will probably kick in that minimum if you have less than 12 or 13 employees. But any more than that, it's a great value because when you consider the cost of paper and stamps and envelopes and the time it takes to stuff those envelopes, then this is a great value. An even better option is if you have chosen to e-file the employee copies, they'll cut that price almost in half at only 99 cents per employee. Now, we haven't chosen that here on our demonstration company, so we've chosen the $1.95 option. But the e-file option, Atrix will send your employees an email. Instead of mailing their copies of the W-2s, they'll just send an email where the employee can log on to the Atrix e-file online e-file center, and they can retrieve their W-2 information electronically. You also, whichever option you select, whether you're going to send the employees the paper copy or the e-file copy, whichever option you select, the employer also has access to the online e-filing service website that Atrix provides, and the employer has access to all the W-2s, so they can have their copies as well. And if you do that, you can choose to print your copies today, This is copy D, the employer copy, or you can just keep them on the Atrix website just by selecting that option there. You select that option to print, uncheck it if you don't want to print copy D. Now another option here is you can have Atrix send you an archive CD of your copy, basically, but it's not just your copy. The archive CD includes all copies. Copies A through D and 1 and 2 will be included on the archive CD as needed, including a copy of the W3. This CD is an extra $29.95 plus $4.95 shipping and handling, but that may be a great option for you as well for archiving purposes. Alternatively, if you don't select the complete service, you can select other options. You can just choose to e-file the federal copy only at 49 cents per employee, and or e-file the state copies at 69 cents per employee. This will also include the state reconciliation forms. Some states require the state copy to be e-filed. And if they do, if you are in a state that requires that, you will have to select this option and pay the additional charges for that Atrix charges. Now, if you select both options, Atrix gives you a discount of 19 cents per employee for selecting both options. So that does give you a little bit lower price there. But then you still must print your employee copies, which is copy 2 for the state and copy B for the federal, and then copy C for the employee to keep for their records. The final option is if you don't e-file anything and you just print everything, including your copy, what this will do is this will print copy A for the federal Social Security and the W3 form, and it will also print copy 1 and the state reconciliation form, but you must use your printer to print those copies, and you must have the correct forms for that, especially on the employee forms. The copy A and the state copies can be printed, for most states, can be printed on plain paper. There's no problem there. But your employee copies, copies B, 1, and C, must be printed according to IRS regulations on the pre-perforated blank paper. So basically it's just a blank 8.5 by 11 page that has a perforation down the middle vertically and across the middle horizontally to split the page up into 4 parts. Because when you print the employee copy, you get all 4 copies all on one page for each employee. You'll get copy B, copy C, and then 2 of copy 2. So either option is you can do. If you choose to print everything and mail it yourself and distribute to your employees yourself, there is no additional cost. That comes included with your Atrix purchase. And once you make those selections, then it just asks you, are you sure you want to print everything? It's a much better value to use the e-file service. So we'll go ahead and say, yeah, we're sure. It's given us a warning for the Oregon W2. It says you've exceeded the maximum limit of paper filings. Employees must submit electronically. So there's a perfect example. Oregon employees must, employers must submit their forms electronically. And now it's asking which states do we want to file. So if I don't want to do my Oregon one, I can uncheck that, or I can go ahead and check it, and it will make the appropriate changes for me. And since I checked Oregon, it's asking which annual report are we using for Oregon. If you don't want to file Oregon now, you select none. Then it's asking if you want to use divider sheets. Yes and no. That just puts a divider sheet between each employee's W2 forms, a blank page. Now here it's asking, it's given us a list of everything we've chosen. And if we want to print this list, we select print here. If we don't want to print this list of all of the tasks that we're about to do, we just simply click next. Now what it's going to do is it's going to actually bring up on the screen the W2 forms. And again, we must register in order to actually process this all the way through filing. But I'll just select evaluate for this purpose. Report 1 of 17, Alabama W2. So there's 17 different reports that we're going to print and mail off. And the reason why is because I've got many states. I can go through each of these as I need. Now your state forms are going to print 4 employees per page. This is copy A, or I'm sorry, copy 1 that goes to the state. This is form W2 state that is to be filed with the state. There's only one because I only have a couple of employees for Alabama. I say no, I don't want to print that now. And then you just go through each form. Here's my BC one, Idaho. See, most of these are only going to have one state per page because in my demo company I don't have that many employees on each state. Because you get 4 employees per page when you're filing the state forms. Now, some states may require you to use those pre-perforated forms. If they do, you'll need to make sure that's done. We're just about done here. I know we've run out of time already, so bear with me here. We're almost done here. Basically, once you get through all the states, then it's going to bring up the federal form, which is copy A. You'll notice the federal form is a little bit different looking because it is going to have 2 per page. Copy A has 2 employees per page. That can be printed on regular plain paper. There it is right there. There's my federal W2 forms. 9 pages because I've got all employees. With 17 employees, it's going to require 9 pages. You don't need any perforated papers for this one here. Once I've done the federal forms, then I can print my W3 form. This is a single page, and this can also be printed on plain paper. And you must sign this and date it. Your title will print here as well, so you'll put that information here as needed. And then here's my state reconciliation forms. It's asking me to fill in the items in red. Once we've completed these steps, it's not going to let me complete it until I fill it in. So let me just put a number there and see if that lets me complete it here. Once I've completed all these steps, all of my forms are filled in. Column 2 tax. So your reconciliation form must be filled in, which you can do that here on the Atrix application. And then you will get the chance to do copy D, which is your copy. And also copies B, C, and 2 for your employees. Now again, copies B, C, and 2 will print 1 employee per page. It does 4 copies for that 1 employee. That way you can mail out those for each page. Anytime in the process, if you exit, it'll ask you, do you want to cancel these reports? If I say yes, it takes me back to the grid. If I exit this step, it says, do I want to save my work in progress and so that I can continue the next time I return to Atrix? I can say yes or no here. If I say no, it resets everything and starts clear over. So at any time, you can do that as long as you have completely filed. But once you have filed, you cannot start the process over. You must do corrected W-2s if needed. Okay, so switch back to my presentation here. Okay. So now here we are. This is my presentation here. It's going through each of the processes. There's the W3 state forms. And when you've completed the test drive, then it's going to ask you, okay, you've completed the test drive, now you must go through the process for real again. So if you know what you're doing, if you've paid attention to this webinar and you feel comfortable, you can probably skip the test drive. Another thing I want to point out here at this point is if you're going to Efile your W-2s, use any of the Efile services, you must set up an account with the Atrix Efile service on their website. Basically, you just register on the Efile center with Atrix. It's just the website there. And you can click here to go ahead and set that up. When you do that, when you get to the Efile process, it will ask you for your login and password so that Atrix can take the data we processed today and submit that for you electronically. So you won't have to print all those forms that we just went through. If you're in the test drive phase, at the end of the test drive, you have an option to just click the button here and it'll launch you right to their website. Okay, so that concludes the W2 process today. Let me just look and see what questions we have real quick. and we will go through those quickly. We are out of time, so I'm just going to spend about 5 minutes here. Question from Susan. Where would we report the ACA information on the W-2, and what code would we use? Susan, I'd love to answer that, but I'm not really familiar with ACA information, so you might need to check with either your Circular E, or if it's a state tax code that you need to put in, check with your state publications on payroll taxes, and they should tell you what box those would go in. And if once you got that information, you would set that up as either a benefit or deduction code in Denali payroll, and then you would assign that using Atrix by assigning the column as needed. If there's actually dollar amounts, you need to report that. Oh, you know what? The light just came on. Affordable Care Act. That's a good question. Affordable Care Act. That is a federal. What that is the W-2 is going to have that information. One of the things that you would need is any employer-sponsored healthcare programs would have to be reported in box 12 under code DD. So make sure that you select that correctly. And that would be set up as a benefit code in Denali. Another question here from Allison. Do you know if Atrix will make available the new 1034, 1035 forms? I believe those are relating to the Affordable Care Act. And yes, Allison, those will be available by the end of this year. So when you're ready to process your W-2 information, you will have those forms available to select from the drop-down. From Sheila, do Denali and vision benefits also, or do dental and vision benefits also get reported on W-2? That is a good question, and I'm not sure. I will find out that answer for you, and I will post the answer on the website. That's something we'll need to check the Affordable Care Act itself to see if that is required. Is health insurance in box 12 DD just employee contribution, EE and ER total, or just ER portion? Again, Susan, you might need to check the laws regarding that, but I believe it's just the ER, the employer portion, that you're required to report there. Don't quote me on that, though. I'm not a payroll tax professional. I can tell you how to run Denali and how to run W-2s, but to get the exact numbers of where they need to go, we will need to make sure those are correct. So I'll confirm that and put the correct answer on the website. Also, do you sell the perforated W-2 paper? If so, what is the cost of the forms and the envelopes? You know, I'm not sure if we do on our forms website. I know Cougar Mountain has a forms website you can purchase, like blank checks and invoice forms, and it's possible we may also sell the perforated W-2 forms. It is a standard form. You're going to use the same format. It's just a 4-part per page laser form. But you can check the Cougar Mountain Forms website or contact your account representative, and they can definitely have the answer for you. I'll confirm that as well and get the correct answer on the website. Another question. Cougar Mountain does provide the W-2. Oh, that's an answer to our previous question. Thank you, Terry. All right, very good. There's your answer. Okay, well, thank you, guys. I appreciate you showing up today. That concludes our website. Be sure to check our website for upcoming webinars. We currently don't have any scheduled since we're wrapping up 2015, but we've got a lot planned for 2016. So be sure to check out the website. We will update that website as we get those webinars scheduled and going. So keep an eye out for upcoming webinars. Also, keep an eye out for any information regarding today's webinar. We will have this webinar posted, and the recording will be available to you on our website at cougarmountain.com. Contact your customer account representative at the number here, or you can send an email to sales@cougarmountain.com for any additional questions. And with that, I want to thank you for being here today. It's been my pleasure to host this webinar, and we will see you next time. Have a great day.